Hi everyone, Chris from BattleGoat Studios with another video for how to do modding for Supreme Ruler. This time I'm going to tackle the scripted events system, which can be quite large, so I'm not sure I'll be able to cover everything that I want to in this particular video. I have a feeling that after posting, we're going to find a number of comments asking about, well, what about this event or that event? Although it's possible we may be able to answer a lot of those questions just on our Discord or on the Steam forums or BattleGoat forums. But I'm going to dive into it. Let's see how far we get and figure out what I need to cover another time. So to begin with, I want to again look at the files on my local installation. I'm going to go to Manage Files, Browse Local Files, look at what I've got right now. In the previous videos we'd continue to work out of the scenario folder, where we have all the different files ending with .scenario. And these are, again, the ones that define everything it's going to use. And we made this World 2027 scenario. I'm going to keep using it. Want to open the file. I have a feeling I opened it twice. I do have it open twice. Excuse me. Still fighting a cough. So this file, one of our early videos, talks about what everything means. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I'm going to go for the exact things I want. And there's two things I was thinking of as I began preparing for this video. We've made this file, and as part of that, we commented out. We use that / to disable a number of files. And there's all these events, specifically Common 2023, Common Events 2023. These are probably files with events we could already be leveraging. But I manually accelerated time. I pushed us to 2027. Before I show events, I'm going to take a small detour and talk about the fast forward system so that you can use events to get where you want to be. I need to compare this to the original Sandbox 2023. What was the start date? Here we are. 2023 07/25. I'm going to restore the date here to what it was originally. And to be able to get to, oh, actually I should undo that. I want 2027/87. To be able to get to that point, I'm going to use the fast forward to get us to 2027/87. That's my target. So I've used a comment here, the / again, so that these can just sit there. And now I sort of need to figure out how many days between those two things. And there's online tools to help with this. Calculate days between two dates. Days between dates. Just grabbed whichever one came up. So from, what was it? 2023. Right, it was July 25th, the release date for Supreme Ruler. 2023 July 25th. And I want to get to 2027. Ooh, that goes pretty far. July 8th. 1,444 days. Perfect. Now I have my number. $1,444 days. So this is going to make the game still start on the same day visibly to us as players, but it's going to process 1,444 days on the back end before things start. As we get into the events, I'll explain a little more about why doing it this way is going to be more effective and allow us to get some events that somebody else took the time to build. So I've changed to a fast forward. The other thing is we have to start deciding which of these files do we actually want to bring back. I've still left out my units, which doesn't really matter right now. Leaders. Actually, leaders might be, it means that we're going to get the 2023 leaders. But that's fine. This will be a good events file to show to start. So this is the file name, leaders 2030. And instead of being stored in the folder of this scenario we've created, it specifies here that it's in the /common folder. Let me show you where that, what I'm talking about there. So when we were creating, I had us working in the .scenario folder for World 2027. And inside a folder of the same name is where we had put the map file, the new CVP, the new region include, the ones that we had created. Oh, and I believe this is still the one, yes, this is our mod where I have cut out a lot of the world. And that's fine. I'll continue. I may restore this at some point before one of my other videos. But for today, I'm just going to leave it as is. So we've only got certain countries we're working with. That's also going to make it a little simpler in terms of scripted events. So leaders, and in fact, I may change this. Do I want to? Again, these modding videos, I often don't go in with much of a plan. No, we'll keep using this. Let's look at that file. So this is the folders where we put files that are specific to what we're creating. But at the root folder of the game, there's a folder called Common. And the idea is that every now and then, multiple maps will use the same source file for certain things, such as leaders. We could have 3 different maps set in 2023. Unless we're making specific changes to leaders, which we could make in other ways, we might as well load from a common file. Let's see what the leaders file actually looks like. Oh, wait a second. This says leaders 2030. And we are referencing the wrong file. I'm going to have to double check some of the other stuff. What does this file contain? Leaders. I believe this is the file that was intended. I wonder if we have some stuff broken. It's very possible. I just found a break in the game. So this is hard to read because it's a whole bunch of numbers. The one thing that's a bit of an advantage is somebody left comments on some of these. So we can see that these are upcoming elections. And this file, it tells us, was created using the asset manager. We try and make most of our files created by tools, we try and embed a comment so we remember how to modify these files. So as opposed to looking at it as a raw file, I'm going to put that away. And for hours, I'm actually going to call this leaders 27. I am going to make a copy of it because there's now a question if we're using it properly. So I'm going to call mine leaders 27. I'm going to take out the comments to activate it. And I'm going to remove this reference to /common because we're going to move it into the copy I'm about to make. I'm going to put it in with our scenarios files. Modified leaders events. Okay. So I think I'm done in the .scenario file for right now. We changed our start date so that we could use a fast forward to get where we want to be. And we've named this new leaders 27. I'm going to close this, saving my changes. And then this file, I'm going to copy it. And scenario, World 2027. And this one belongs just here in the root of our scenario's own named folder. Paste. And now I need to rename it to specifically say 27. So we have told the .scenario we have an event file you want to use. Let's actually start looking at how the events are set up and how they work. To do this, I am going to again use the content editor. Within the content editor, specifically, I'm after the asset manager, which really is the tool you'll see me using the most. We're going to need to import our file, which we're still working in the scenario folder, to find the folder for our named scenario, and there's the file that I want to work with. Now, sometimes when you're bringing in a file, if it's using the .csv extension, which is quite common, the asset manager isn't entirely sure what you're bringing in. So as you can see, there's a huge list of things here. And events happens to be the one I brought in last time, so that's the correct one. And this sort of actually gives you a clue to all the different things this tool is capable of editing. Some of them, even in the newer, even in the new game, the tool still has access to some of the older files that it can bring in. So I'm going to bring in events. All right, so this is the default view for events. You'll notice on the left side where it shows the tab General, we haven't subdivided things into multiple tabs. These are all the variables, all the values you can use when creating an events file. Some of them default hidden, and I'll talk about those ones later. For now, I'm going to talk about the view that's in front of me. And forgive me if I do some of these out of order, because in my brain, there sort of is a hierarchy of which ones matter the most. So once it's brought in, I have a tendency to click on the header for this peach orange colored column. I want to sort everything by this. One of the limitations in our tool, because of the way some of our backend stuff works, unfortunately the name of every column begins with the word event. This means that when they're all tight like this, it's very difficult to see what you're working with. I'm going to widen some of these up. That's a simple click drag on the edge of it. Yeah, just going to get a few more of these wide. Okay, this layout is now enough that I can work with it. So obviously each row is one event for the game. And you can see here that the first one that happens one day after our game released, and I remember this was a case, is the coup in Niger happened the day after the game released. So it happens on the second day of the game when people are playing. And again, if we're making a 2027 start, we're totally fine with the fact that a couple years earlier the coup in Niger happened, because that's a reflection of the real world. This column that's called event comment, this is not read by the game engine. This is there specifically for designers to be able to understand what's gone into the file. The orange column is time. So this event is going to happen one day after the start date that's been specified at the bottom, not our 2027. This is why I used that fast forward, is I wanted to be able to use all of these, but some of them would have been in the past. Interestingly, if I skim down the numbers, I can already see this event happens 2004 days in, but we've fast forwarded to 1444, so we're only about 600 days away now. And I suppose I could have done the math, I could have eliminated everything higher up, but that's just more difficult to me. So we can see day 1, day 26. This is the column that lets you set when something is going to happen. I should specify that you can do fractions of days. If I did 26.5, instead of happening at the start of the day, it would happen halfway through the day. You could do 26.25, so it's going to happen at 6 a.m. of the day that we had targeted. This is for setting the absolute day that it arrives on. There's actually a hidden column I want to talk about right now. Event window. I turned this on by adding the check mark on the left. We can now see event window. And we haven't really used any of these. And anything that happens before our start, anything that's in that fast forward block, really won't matter to us. But this El Salvador election, sometimes we have looked up dates for elections and it only tells us what month and year it'll happen in. Maybe the date, maybe the exact date hasn't been set yet. And so we want to add a little bit of flexibility. What I could do here is put a window value of 5, and that means it's going to happen anytime between day 2004 and 2009. It says it's creating a window. And this can be very useful if you're just trying to create scenarios that have a little bit of ebb and flow, that happen in a slightly different way each time players play without being radically different. Okay, I'm going to right click and hide that column. Time, we saw the window. Every now and then you may have multiple events happening on the same day that you're trying to set up a complex series. You can use this priority to indicate in what order they should happen if their time is exactly the same. You'd set 90 for the thing that's most important, then 80, 70, 60, 50, and so on. The priority, we don't use it too often in the modern maps. When we're developing for 1914, 1936, we get some much more complex historical events, and we do sort of need to set up dominoes to fall in a specific order. So we've got the comments and when it happens. The next thing I want to talk about is what happens. That's this column here for event ID. And these are all numbers. And even after all these years working with it, I don't remember what all these numbers are. I actually remember a few because I've done this so much, but I have to look them up. The source for knowing where these are is, not the day calculator, it's the Supreme Wiki. Oh, sorry for the commercial there that popped up. The Supreme Wiki that I've talked about in other videos. We have a whole page on events. This page begins by defining all those columns you see at the top in the asset manager, but then it starts telling you what does every ID of event actually do. So let's go back to what I had there, a type 20 event. We can go here, scroll down to 20. It is a leadership change, which sort of makes sense for the coup. So this right now says that on day 1, we're going to do a leadership change. We haven't worried about the priority. We saw there was no window. Now the events can do some fairly complex things. Because of this, when you've assigned an event, you have a number of parameters you can set that will control how it does that event. And you could argue that nearly every column here is a parameter, but I want to think about 9 very specific values that you set. The first one is shown in this pink column. And this is called event param. It is the main parameter. In a lot of cases, the main parameter, which, my apologies, I have to go back to the top of this table to see the headers. Main parameter for a lot of things is sending an email or news item. So when the event happens, I want to send a news item, an alert message to the player, telling them about the thing that just happened. That is often how it is, but I can show you an example of something that's different. The type 10 event is a popular one. It creates units. And for that one, its main parameter is the ID from the equipment file of the unit you want to create. So a type 10 event with an ID for an Arleigh Burke destroyer would be able to put an Arleigh Burke onto the map. So event ID, when does it happen? What's the main parameter? And you can see here most of these are, and so we didn't use a news item on the Niger coup, but certain events in the game, when a leadership change happens, it has a predetermined message that goes out with it. So we didn't really need to tell the player. The game's already going to manage that one for us. The next 8, so I said there were 9 parameters. The first one is that one there. The next 8, which is really 2 times 4, are the green columns and the purple columns. And if anybody has a little bit of programming background, I will say that the first 4 are integer values. They cannot have a decimal place. The next 4 are float values. They can have a decimal place. If you're not a programmer, don't worry too much. It just, for us, when we designed the events, it determined where we could put certain things and what we could support. How you know what to put in these 8 spots is, again, going to the Gamepedia, going to the Supreme Wiki, and looking it up. Let's find the type 20 again. And not all parameters are used on all event types. This one tells us that the I0, which is the first of the integers, is going to be the ID of the new leader. If we leave it blank, the game will assign a random person. And the F0, the first of the floats, actually can be used to move them within the sphere of influence system if we choose to. Let's see what was actually used there. Event 0. Not sure why we used an event, an I1 on this. Sorry, I'm widening these so you can see them a little bit. So this says event param I0, event param I1. So there are 4 integers, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 floats, 0, 1, 2, 3. So I'm just looking at this again. Yeah, the I1 isn't defined. Looking at the notes, this 2555 is doing nothing. I wonder if a designer tried using this to keep notes, which is a bad plan. We shouldn't be doing that. I'm definitely going to have to do some cleanup on this file after I'm done recording the video. But yeah, so this is going to put leader 3705 as the new leader of Niger. Guatemalan election. Now this one isn't a type 20 change leader because this is a forcible leader change. 32, if we look that up, that is an election leader change, different than a forced leader change. And here we see different, oh, I wonder if they were trying to use this as the next, my apologies, I ramble every now and then. This one we can see has an I0, which is again setting a new leader, but here it actually uses the I1, the integer value. That's the number of days until the next election happens. So these are sort of good examples of how the scripted event system works, is that you can set up an event and tie it to future actions. Okay, I want to try and take us through this. Like I said, I'm looking at this and going, I'm definitely going to want a second video to go deeper into the events, but this will give an overview. So what's the ID? When does it happen? What's its main parameter? What are its other parameters? And you have to look up on the wiki page to know what the parameters do. These purple columns, these are called event DB region and event other DB region. This is because events always relate to one region, and sometimes it's about interactions between regions. If we used to declare war, I would put region and other region, region declares war on other region. These ones appear to be all these type 20 leader changes or type 32 elections, which makes sense for a leaders file. So we only get the first region. There is no other region in the case of an election. Okay, so what's it doing? When does it do it? Who does it do it to? What exactly does it do? All those parameters. Okay, let me tighten up some of these columns again, because I want to start working over here. There's a few check marks and a few other values here. I'm actually going to jump all the way to the end. The last two columns. Actually, I'm going to hide my parameters here so I can widen things up. Okay. The last two columns in the default view, and I should warn that as you work with stuff, you are allowed to move things around, which can confuse things. But these last two, it says event conditional. The idea is that these IDs, this is just a unique identifier, so there can't be two of the same numbers. These IDs can be used to hold back something else. Maybe I want to wait that when the election happens, I then want two other regions to make a request of the new leader. I could set up an event and specify 18598, this number here. If I put 18598 into this, well, the Guatemala election could not happen unless the Niger coup had happened. Now, these events don't give a good example of why you would do that, because these events are quite simple, but you can hold things back with up to two IDs. You can make those preconditions for the event you're working on. The default, if you fill both values, if I did 1 and 2, well, event 1 and 2 would both have to be true, would have to have completed for my event to happen. It does this, if we talk, in computer science, we talk about Boolean logic. This would be an and. You must have 1 and 2. The reason I bring that up is some of these check marks. This check mark uses the Boolean function of or. So now 1 or 2 would have to be true for us to continue with our event. The other check mark you have here is not. If I put 1 and 2 and then I say not, I'm reversing the logic. 1 and 2 must actually be false for mine to continue. If they've become true, it would interrupt my event. So these four columns are a way of holding things back a little bit, and you can use or with not, which Boolean calls that nor, but I'm getting too far off topic. So those four are how you stage the stuff. These two here, I need to explain that our event system is constantly hitting checking things based on the day counts. As things go by, it looks for its event. Day 29 comes up, it looks at 21202, and it tries to do it. Now, if there are preconditions that hold it back and they're false, it would try, see they're false, would never do it again. We do, however, have the ability to turn on something called persist. This check mark means that once day 29 shows up, it's going to keep trying to do this event forever until the prerequisites fire true. Now, I said forever, but we can put limits on it. Sometimes there's just no point. Maybe after 500 days, that's this persist count, after 500 days, stop trying. The persist and the persist count, I need to share to all the modders out there. Using persist puts pressure on the CPU. A lot of persistent events will begin to slow down the game. This is something we've struggled with at times of trying to balance this. Galactic Ruler Enlightenment campaigns, the recent release, we had big issues where we were starting to get a big performance drain because we were running so many kinds of events that were persistent, and the CPU is just getting bogged down checking all these different things. So it should be used sparingly, but there's times where it's appropriate to do it that way. Okay, how am I doing on time? I should probably stop at this for this first dive into scripted events. I will do another video at some point, which will look at a few more examples. But yeah, I want to stop here for today. We'll do the whole recache and test it out on another video. Hopefully this has been useful. If you want to know more, if you have specifics that you'd like me to hit next within the events, please leave the comments below, or if there's other things you'd like us to cover, let us know, and catch us on Steam forums or on our Discord. And if you're playing the game and you're enjoying it, please leave us a Steam review. It is very much appreciated. Have a good day.